Twilight Gets a Puppy. By TDR. Chapter 10. Dog Eat Dog. Part 1. Sparkle Residence. 2 years remaining until the 1000th year. How did this happen? Where did I go wrong? A fit, white-furred, and blue-maned unicorn in a guard sergeant's armor bemoaned. Woof. A navy blue canine creature with long pointed ears and feline features responded. The creature was sitting on his rump. Light brown pants with numerous pockets covered his legs with a slit cut in the back of the waistband for a feline-like tail to poke out. A dim orb of light floated at each long ear tip and the end of the creature's tail barely visible in the room's light. The creature looked much like a diamond dog, though its limbs were more evenly matched with the rest of its body, and it didn't seem top-heavy like a normal diamond dog, despite being fairly well-muscled. Its finger-like paws also displayed no visible claws as it thumbed through a book, barely paying attention to the pacing stallion aside from a glance to two at him with his amber-colored eyes. "What?" the stallion asked. He asked, "How were you blaming yourself for this? You've been in training for the last couple of years." Another smaller creature asked from his place leaning against the side of the canine. The pudgy young dragon was covered in purple scales with bright green rounded spines. One of his claws was plucking a gem from a small bowl of them next to him, while the other held a comic book that he stared at with fascination as some fight or another was breaking out in the pages. "I could have stopped this. If I never joined the guard, I could have been here to stop this from happening." Shining snorted. "Seriously bro, you're acting like Twilight died. She's 16, ponies do this sort of thing all the time. Heck, Mom thinks she's started too late," Spike explained. Celestia was delighted too. "Gruff." Ross nodded in agreement. The trio were currently in Shining Armor's old room. The place had barely been touched since he left for guard training. While their brother usually stayed in the guardhouse when in Canterlot, their parents didn't want to change how the room looked. Luckily, the Sparkle homestead already had a few extra rooms unused, so when Ross and Spike got older they moved into their own room and out of Twilight's. Granted, the space their things had been in the shared room immediately became more bookshelves, but no one expected anything else. Shining dragged the pair into his room when he came home for a weekend and found out what was going on. "He's my age," Shining growled. "He's only 2 years older than Twilight, you're 10 years older than Twilight," Spike pointed out. "Woof," Ross corrected. "Okay, you're 9 years and 6 months older than Twilight." Spike rolled his eyes. "He's not your age. That's still too much of an age gap," Shining protested. Spike and Ross lowered their comic and book respectively, looked at each other, then to the pacing stallion, and then over to his dresser where a picture of Princess Cadence sat, then back at Shining, who at least had the decency to look a bit ashamed for his hypocrisy. "Okay, bad example," Shining quickly corrected. "You ever find out how much older she is than you?" Spike taunted, going back to his comic. "Grove," Ross smirked. "He says his bits are on 500 to 600 years. Spike smirked. "I'd bet closer to 2 to 3 myself." "I said bad example," Shining grumbled. "But still, it's Blue Blood who asked her." "Blue Blood? The guy's first name is Prince, for crying out loud, how pompous is that?" "Woof. We've met him. He's not bad. And it's not like he chose his name himself." Spike rolled his eyes. He and Ross were used to Twilight having meltdowns about being tardy, tests, or anything else that came up that wasn't on one of her lists. To see Shining do it made them both wonder if it was genetic. The pair were actually glad for once that they were adopted, so they wouldn't ever have to find out for sure. "He's up to something, I know it. Why did he even come after Twilight? What's the edge he's after?" Shining growled. "He must be trying to get close to Princess Celestia through her student." "Rough. Ross says he's Celestia's nephew, he doesn't need to use Twilight to get close to the princess," Spike pointed out. "It must be the family's money then." "Grove. Yeah, seriously. Dude's family has bought an entire town before, just to move the entire thing 30 miles to the west because the road to it ran across the view from their third summer home. Spike snarked. Bits ain't it? Particularly when Mom counts our allowance out in quarter bits sometimes. Well, what other reason could it be? Shining snapped. I dunno, maybe he thought she's cute. Spike asked as Ross shrugged. What? Shining shouted. Yeah, when he asked her on a date, Prince was super nervous, not as bad as Twilight got. I mean, I doubt he checked out the entire section on dating at the library like Twilight did. Spike considered. Because she checked out the entire section on dating to study up for it. Woof. Ross pointed out. Oh yeah, he did mention that he had help mustering up the courage to ask, so he's probably as clueless as Twilight is. Spike agreed with Ross. Well, maybe not now after she's read all those books. What help? Who helped him set this up with Twilight? Shining demanded. Spike and Ross lowered their comic and book respectively, looked at each other, then to the pacing stallion, and then over to his dresser where a picture of Princess Cadence sat, then back at Shining who had buried his face into both hooves. Buck my life, Shining groaned. What can you do? Your mere friend set up the date with your little sister. Twilight won't answer the door as she's too panicked about studying for the date, and Mom's all for it to the point she's keeping Dad occupied so he can't intervene. Bark. Yet, he won't let me play with that griffin's crossbow he got either. Spike pouted. All right. Shining said suddenly. I have a plan. The scariest 4 words in the Ekis language right there. Spike stated as Ross shuddered. No, it's brilliant. Shining stated, a manic grin crossing his features. His brothers glanced to each other, then to the door pondering if they could make it in time. We'll follow them tonight and make sure he doesn't try anything. It'll be perfect. Unless, ya know, she sees us. A moondog, a royal guard, and a little dragon are not exactly stealthy. Spike complained. Woof. You're about as stealthy as a herd of buffalo. I thought you were supposed to be part cat. Spike snapped. Bork. You did no such thing, that was your oubliettes and ogre's character, and he was more of a shaman anyway, you just lucked out with a nat 20. Spike pointed out. Woof. Ross counted. Gah, alright, you got me there. Twilight's in test mode, she wouldn't notice a herd of buffalo. But Prince might. Spike grumbled. Grr. Lost in her eyes. Spike blinked before narrowing his eyes at the canine. Have you been reading Mom's books again? Ross didn't say anything, but he didn't meet Spike's glare either. Shining on the other hoof was still rambling, ignoring the conversation. I bet he's even got photographers around ready to snap a shot for blackmail to force her to marry him. Ross's ears perked up at that, though Spike was less than amused. Blackmail? It's a date, ponies have them all the time, the little drake groaned. Bork. You're in? What do you mean you're in? This is crazy. Spike growled. I'm the youngest one here and I've got the most sense. Bark, bark, bark. Ross countered, closing his book fully as Spike calmed down and pondered, looking at the frazzled Shining. Yeah, he'd go anyway. All right, I'm in. Now let's get him calmed down. Prince is supposed to be here in 2 hours and we need at least one of those hours to calm Twilight down too. Spike sighed, steeling himself for what he was sure was going to be a long night. Author's note. I know I said I was going on a bit of a break, but 10 minutes after I posted that blog entry this idea hit me and I was giggling too hard to let it go. Also, it still adds to the month of the puppy, so. Title is Dog Eat Dog. End author's note. End chapter 10. Dog Eat Dog. Part 1.